So, I, it's been kind of a hot topic recently.
Mm.
This whole thing with the national anthems at NHL games.
Yeah.
And people booing.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really something you would have expected, right?
Right.
It's definitely something new, at least on this scale. So it makes you wonder,
It does.
like, what is the NHL doing about this? Where do they stand?
Yeah.
Luckily, we've got some good info to go on.
We do.
Elliotte Friedman, he's given us some pretty solid insights.
Yeah. He's a great source.
He really is. So we're going to do a deep dive on this whole anthem situation based on Friedman's comments.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
So first off, from what you gather from Friedman's take, is the NHL even acknowledging this is happening?
Oh. Oh, yeah, they are.
Okay, good.
Definitely. He makes it clear that the league is well aware of the booing going on.
Right.
And what's interesting is that he suggests that they understand it's not necessarily about hockey itself.
Right.
It's kind of like fans are using this moment to express frustration about other stuff, bigger issues.
Makes sense. So they're not just dismissing it as like rowdy fans being rowdy fans.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, so that's good. So they hear it, they get it,
Mm-hmm.
but what are they actually doing about it? Like, have we seen any policy changes?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Oh,
Because according to Friedman, it seems like they're going with
yeah.
what he calls the status quo.
Okay, so just like keep doing what they've always done.
Pretty much, yeah. They're sticking with playing both anthems, the Canadian and American one,
Right.
before every game, just like always.
It's interesting because it seems almost counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Like you'd think maybe they'd want to, I don't know, try something different.
Yeah, maybe.
But it seems like they're sticking to tradition here.
Yeah, and Friedman hints that this isn't exactly a new situation for them.
Oh, really?
He emphasizes that historically the NHL has always leaned towards
Yeah.
upholding these kind of like pre-game rituals.
Ah, I see.
They kind of see it as like, honoring tradition.
Okay, yeah. So this whole anthem thing, it's not really throwing them off their game.
Exactly. They've kind of been there, done that, and their go-to is to stick with the tradition.
Gotcha. So is Friedman saying anything about, like, why they do that?
Yeah, and this is where it gets a bit more strategic.
Okay.
Friedman kind of implies that the NHL might actually think that changing the policy would cause more backlash than just letting the booing happen.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense, right?
Right.
Because you're going to tick off a lot more people if you just get rid of the anthems completely.
Yeah.
Than you will by letting a few people boo.
Exactly.
So who do you think they're most worried about upsetting?
Well, Friedman actually tells this really fascinating story about when he was working at CBC.
Okay.
And they decided to stop showing the anthems.
Oh, wow.
And the viewers, they went ballistic.
Oh, no kidding.
They were not happy.
Like they were actually calling in and complaining.
Big time, yeah.
Wow, okay. And what happened? Did they...
CBC had to backpedal so fast.
Yeah.
They put the anthems right back on.
I guess sometimes you don't know how much you value something until it's gone, huh?
Absolutely.
Wow, so the NHL's probably looking at that situation thinking, we don't want that to happen to us.
Right. That's a huge takeaway.
They're walking a bit of a tightrope here, aren't they?
They are.
So to recap for everyone listening, the NHL knows fans are booing, but they're keeping the anthems.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably doing that because they think it'll cause less trouble than getting rid of them.
Exactly.
And that story about CBC is like a big flashing warning sign.
For sure.
Don't mess with the anthems.
Exactly.
So what do you think the long-term consequences of all this are? It feels like they're just ignoring the problem.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because on one hand, you could argue that they are kind of brushing it under the rug.
Right.
But on the other hand, they're also sending a message, right?
Yeah.
Like, we hear you, but we think this is more important.
Right.
We think honoring this tradition is more important.
Yeah.
So it's a gamble, and only time will tell if it pays off for them.
Exactly. I guess that's something for everyone listening to think about.
Definitely.
If this keeps up, how is it going to affect the whole atmosphere at games?
Yeah.
And how are all the different types of fans going to react?
That's the big question.
Yeah. It's definitely a situation worth keeping an eye on.
Absolutely.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, keep your sticks on the ice.
And your heads up.